In the quiet of that moment, her words and her presence held a truth I wasn't ready for, but couldn't resist. The moment she pulled me aside, the air seemed to tighten around us. Her hand brushed mine, fleeting yet electric, and I felt a shiver I couldn't name. Her eyes, warm, knowing, and a little mischievous, held mine a second too long, as if daring me to speak, to move, to acknowledge the tension that neither of us had the courage to name. There was a subtle heat in the space between us, something unspoken lingering like the scent of rain on warm pavement. I could feel it in the small tilt of her head, in the soft curve of her smile, the way her voice lowered just enough to make ordinary words feel charged. She leaned closer, close enough that I caught the faint scent of her perfume, something floral with a hint of spice. "I can't stop thinking about you," she whispered, and it wasn't just a confession. It was a temptation, a challenge wrapped in warmth. I wanted to step back, to insist this was impossible, that boundaries existed. But my body betrayed my mind, leaning subtly toward hers despite every rational thought warning me otherwise. There was a pull between us, electric and undeniable, an invisible thread tethering me to her even as the world outside our small, secluded corner hummed along obliviously. I couldn't place it. Was it the memory of her laughter at my failed jokes, the way she seemed to notice things no one else did, or the simple gravity of being seen fully, completely, by someone I shouldn't feel this way about? There was history in our smiles, in shared glances, in subtle touches that lingered longer than necessary. A chemistry built on stolen moments and unspoken desires, simmering quietly just beneath the surface, waiting for permission to ignite. And yet, here we were, standing too close, breathing the same air, caught in a suspended moment between daring and restraint. My pulse raced, my thoughts scattered, and still I didn't move away. The seconds stretched like fragile glass, delicate and dangerous, holding the weight of something we both knew we shouldn't act on, yet couldn't resist entirely. The screen of reality blurred around us, leaving just the two of us and the tantalizing question of what might come next. She didn't let go immediately. Her fingers lingered near mine, hovering as if daring me to reach, to close the tiny distance she had created. I could feel the warmth radiating from her hand, a subtle pull that made my chest tighten and my thoughts scatter. Every glance we shared seemed to carry weight, a language built from unspoken words and small, deliberate movements. The quiet of the room made each sound sharper, the faint rustle of her dress, the soft intake of my breath, the distant hum of life outside. "I didn't mean to," she started, her voice trailing into a delicate whisper that seemed to wrap around me. I wanted to ask her to finish, but the words caught in my throat, tangled with my racing pulse. Her gaze was fixed on me, searching, questioning, and in that stare, I felt a pull so strong I almost forgot the world existed beyond this corner of our reality. She shifted slightly, and the accidental brush of her elbow against mine sent a jolt through me. I flinched, but only subtly, trying to mask the thrill of contact that lingered longer than it should. Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile, one that suggested she felt it too, the same sharp, sweet ache of proximity and anticipation. Our conversation slowed, replaced by a quiet energy that hummed between us, words unnecessary when every glance, every pause, carried more meaning than speech ever could. There was hesitation in the way she moved, a softness that betrayed her inner conflict. I understood because I felt it too, this magnetic tension between us, an attraction both irresistible and forbidden. I wanted to lean closer, to feel her presence even more keenly. Yet some part of me held back, a whisper of reason that reminded me how delicate and complicated this moment was. The room felt smaller somehow, compressed by our shared space, the air thick with things we couldn't say. I caught a hint of her perfume again, something calming yet exciting, and it lingered, teasing my senses. For a heartbeat, time slowed. Nothing else existed but her, the subtle play of expression across her face, the rise and fall of her breath, and the invisible thread pulling us together while tethering us to restraint. And then, she looked away. Just for a second, just long enough to make me ache for her gaze again. The tension didn't dissolve. It deepened, promising more, daring us to step closer even as the world outside whispered caution. I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on us, heavier than the silence that filled the space. Every glance carried a confession we couldn't voice, a longing tempered by restraint. I wanted to lean in, just close enough to feel the warmth of her breath against mine, but something inside me, the part that feared crossing a line, stopped me. She seemed to feel it too, the push and pull of desire and hesitation, a magnetic tension that made the air between us almost tangible. Her fingers brushed mine again, deliberately this time, sending a ripple through my chest that I couldn't hide. I felt it everywhere. A shiver along my spine, a tightening in my stomach, a sudden awareness of how close we were. She caught my reaction and smiled softly, a mixture of amusement and something more tender, more vulnerable. It was a smile that spoke of secrets, of feelings hidden behind years of caution and social boundaries, of a temptation that had been brewing quietly, dangerously, just beneath the surface. "I shouldn't," she murmured, her voice catching in a way that made my pulse skip. But her eyes didn't leave mine, and the brief hesitation in her words only heightened the intensity between us. There was so much we weren't saying. Our past conversations, the laughter we had shared, the tiny, unnoticed touches over time. They all converged in this single, suspended moment. I almost leaned in. Her face was so close, so inviting, and yet I pulled back slightly. Not because I didn't want it, but because I wanted it too much. The desire was intoxicating, a slow-burning ache that threatened to overwhelm both reason and restraint. She mirrored my hesitation, her own pull toward me tempered by the same internal struggle. The room seemed to shrink around us, every shadow and flicker of light amplifying the electricity in the air. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but the stakes, the unspoken rules, the potential heartbreak, held me frozen. She gave a small, knowing sigh, the kind that acknowledged the invisible walls between us without breaking them. And still, in that glance, in that brush of fingertips, in that almost touch, we both knew nothing had changed, yet everything had shifted. We stood there, suspended in time, caught between what we wanted and what we couldn't risk. Every heartbeat screamed for closeness, yet every thought reminded us to step back. The tension didn't fade. It deepened, heavy and intoxicating, promising a storm that neither of us was ready to weather. Yet, the room seemed to shrink around us, every shadow and flicker of light amplifying the electricity that hummed in the air. My pulse pounded in my ears, a rapid, insistent drum that matched the quiet rush of energy between us. She shifted slightly, and the faint brush of her shoulder against mine sent a jolt through me, sharp and thrilling, as if the very air had caught fire. Every glance, every subtle movement, felt magnified, weighty, charged, impossible to ignore. Her eyes held me captive, wide, vulnerable, yet daring, as if she were both inviting me closer and warning me away. I've thought about you," she whispered, the words soft, almost fragile, yet carrying the weight of months or years of suppressed emotion. My breath caught. The confession wasn't loud, but it landed inside me like thunder. I could feel the intensity of what she didn't say, the pull of everything hidden behind that single phrase. We didn't speak after that. Words felt unnecessary, too clumsy, too slow to capture the currents running between us. Instead, we let the silence breathe, filling the space with an almost unbearable tension. My fingers twitched, wanting to reach for hers, to bridge the gap between yearning and reality, but I stopped just short. Her hand hovered, almost mirroring mine, so close that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. It was a near touch, but the impact was seismic, more than any words could convey. She leaned in slightly, and the faintest trace of her breath brushed my cheek, sending shivers down my spine. Time seemed to stretch, each heartbeat echoing like a drum in a cathedral. Every instinct screamed for closeness, yet restraint held us suspended, like two charged particles caught in the tension of inevitable attraction. I could feel her presence like a magnet, pulling, teasing, demanding acknowledgement without a single overt move. For a heartbeat, I thought we might finally close the space. Our faces were inches apart. The world beyond the room had disappeared entirely. And then, just as I leaned forward, the weight of reality, of boundaries and consequences, pressed down, stopping me. Her gaze softened, almost tender, and in that moment, the air between us felt alive, thick with longing, anticipation, and unspoken promises. We were so close, closer than we'd ever been, and yet, still just out of reach. The rain tapped softly against the window, a rhythmic lullaby that seemed to slow the world outside, leaving just the two of us in our own suspended reality. The warm glow of the lamp painted gentle shadows across the room, softening her features, highlighting the subtle curve of her smile, the delicate catch of her breath. Every sense was heightened, the faint scent of rain mingling with her perfume, the warmth radiating from her skin, the way her gaze held me as if she could see straight into the depths of my thoughts. We moved closer without speaking, a silent understanding guiding our steps. Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining naturally, as though the connection had always existed, waiting for this moment to bloom. The small touch carried an electric charge that sent shivers cascading down my spine. I could feel her breath melt into mine, a soft, shared rhythm that said everything words could not. Our hearts spoke in quiet, insistent pulses, keeping time with the storm outside, echoing the unspoken tension that had been building between us for weeks. The world fell away, leaving only warmth, light, and the subtle press of our bodies as we leaned into each other. Her head tilted slightly, resting just against my chest, and I felt the rise and fall of her breath, the gentle heat of her skin against mine. It was an intimacy beyond words, an acknowledgement, a surrender, a trust that neither of us had dared to voice before. The closeness was intoxicating, a heady mix of longing and fulfillment, every heartbeat amplified in the quiet stillness of the room. I traced a finger along the line of her arm, not touching, yet feeling the electricity of connection in the space between us. She responded with a soft sigh, a subtle shift closer, and the tension that had been simmering for so long finally unraveled in a slow, exquisite release. Our bodies spoke in language older than speech, a poetry of motion and presence, a confession of desire expressed purely through closeness and warmth. The rain outside became a gentle accompaniment, a soft percussion to the symphony of our hearts and breaths, amplifying every sensation. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed without distinction. Each glance, each gentle touch, each shared breath carried the weight of every unspoken thought, every hidden feeling, every moment we had resisted the inevitable. The room seemed to hum with it, alive with a quiet, shimmering energy that was at once fragile and infinite. For the first time, we let the world fall away completely, letting our connection speak for itself in the tender press of skin to skin, in the slow, deliberate closeness that said more than words ever could. It was a night suspended in time, a night of surrender and discovery, a night where longing and restraint dissolved into warmth, trust, and a quiet, breathtaking love that needed nothing more than presence, nothing more than feeling. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and hesitant, casting long, gentle shadows across the room. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the world outside washed and quiet. We lay there in a kind of fragile peace, the warmth of the night still lingering between us, but now tempered by the weight of reality. Words felt unnecessary, almost impossible, too heavy, too loaded, but the silence itself spoke volumes. I traced a line along her shoulder with my fingers, careful, reverent, and she shivered softly, not moving away. The night had been ours, a surrender to something undeniable, but now the questions came creeping in. What does this mean? Who are we now? My chest felt tight, as if each thought was a heartbeat too fast, too loud, too revealing. Her gaze found mine quiet, searching. Was it real? she asked, her voice a soft tremor, almost afraid to hear the answer. I hesitated, caught between certainty and doubt, knowing that the truth was somewhere messy, somewhere human. It had been real in every pulse and breath, but reality was complicated. And yet, in that look, in that fragile, lingering touch, I felt a deeper connection than either of us had anticipated. A tether that had tightened in ways we hadn't known were possible. We sat up slowly, brushing against each other as we moved, careful not to break the fragile spell. The world outside intruded. A soft knock at the door. My heart lurched. Who could it be now at this fragile hour? She glanced at me, eyes wide, searching, and I felt the weight of shared secrets pressing down on us. The knock repeated, more insistent, and the room, once a sanctuary of closeness, now felt too small, too exposed. We froze, caught between the lingering intimacy and the intrusion of reality. The connection we had forged was undeniable, but now it carried complication, expectation, possibility. Whoever stood outside the door would not only find two people in a room, they would find a story, a tension, a truth neither of us had fully spoken. And yet, even with the world pressing in, I felt her hand brush mine again, subtle, reassuring, a reminder that whatever came next, we had crossed something profound together. The morning carried uncertainty, but also a strange, tender hope. Our hearts had touched, and that was something no knock, no consequence, could erase. The evening settled softly around us, warm amber light spilling across the room as if the world itself had slowed to honor the quiet intimacy between us. She leaned her head gently against my chest, and I rested my hand on the curve of her shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat beneath my fingers. It was a peace born not of perfection, but of acceptance, of knowing that in the midst of chaos, in the tangle of desire and hesitation, we had found each other. Neither of us spoke. Words felt unnecessary when the air was already dense with unspoken confessions, shared glances, and the lingering echoes of our closeness. Her breath brushed against my collarbone, light and tender, and I felt the slow, steady warmth of her presence seep into me. In that quiet, suspended moment, the world outside, its rules, its expectations, its judgments, faded to nothing. We had crossed lines that once seemed insurmountable, and yet here we were, choosing to remain, choosing connection, choosing peace. We shifted slightly, lips brushing foreheads, a slow, deliberate gesture that carried more weight than any grand declaration. In that touch, everything balanced. The longing and the restraint, the hesitation and the surrender, the fear and the undeniable pull of hearts that had been orbiting each other for far too long. It was intimate, it was tender, it was human. The night stretched around us like a protective cloak. In the simplicity of shared warmth, of soft laughter, and quiet smiles, we found closure and continuation simultaneously. Whatever had happened was no longer a moment of recklessness, but a quiet affirmation of what had always been simmering beneath the surface. And if tomorrow brought uncertainty, it didn't matter. For tonight, we existed wholly in each other's presence, and the memory of this closeness, soft, electric, breathtaking, would linger in our hearts forever, like a whisper or a scent that never fades.